I want you to close your eyes for just a second and picture a scene straight out of one of those massive Hollywood historical blockbusters.
Oh, I can already see the fog rolling in.
Right. So imagine a colossal fleet of wooden ships hitting a foggy shore. The ocean is crashing, you've got this dramatic orchestral music swelling in the background, and suddenly dozens of these burly, long-haired warriors leap out into the freezing surf.
Wielding massive iron swords.
Exactly, swords and huge, brutal axes. And they are rampaging toward a quiet coastal village, completely ready to conquer it. It's terrifying, it's epic, and it's pretty much exactly what we all imagine when we think of a regular day in the life of a Viking.
Yeah, it's the ultimate cultural stereotype. It's exactly the image we've been sold by centuries of pop culture and cinema.
But what if I told you that almost everything you think you know about these fierce ancient raiders is completely wrong?
That is quite the road pull.
Right. What if the movies have just been feeding us a highly stylized fantasy, completely ignoring a reality that is actually far more complex and honestly a lot more interesting?
And that is the exact historical knot we're going to untangle today.
Yes, welcome to this special deep dive. We are taking a slightly different approach today. This isn't just a journey into the past, it is an immersive exploration of history and the English language.
Two birds with one stone.
Exactly. For those of you listening, we're going to uncover the real history of the Vikings, bust those movie myths, and we'll be unpacking some key English vocabulary along the way. I'll drop in some quick Chinese translations here and there to help you truly grasp these concepts.
Because to really understand the vocabulary, you absolutely have to understand the historical context.
Yeah.
So we are looking at a specific window of time known as the Viking Age. This era lasted for roughly 250 years, stretching from around AD 800 to AD 1050.
And when we talk about their origins, we are looking at incredibly skilled sailors hailing from Norse territory. And just a quick language note for you guys, when we say Norse, we are referring to Tyskland, the Northern Europeans from the region that makes up modern-day Denmark, Norway, and Sweden.
Precisely. And what really stands out when you look at the archaeological record is their astonishing global footprint. They didn't just stay isolated up in their snowy fjords.
No, they were everywhere.
They were master navigators. They explored, conquered, and traded across a staggering expanse of the globe. They traveled all across Europe, sailed down rivers into the Middle East.
Reaching places like modern-day Ukraine and Russia, right?
Yeah, even the heart of the Byzantine Empire in Istanbul. And incredibly, they navigated all the way across the freezing North Atlantic Ocean to North America.
Landing in Newfoundland, Canada.
Centuries before Columbus.
It is truly wild to think about them crossing the open ocean in wooden boats. But the mechanics of how they traveled actually brings us to our first massive historical myth.
Ah, yes.
Myth number 1. Vikings used catapults in battle. You always see this in the movies.
The dramatic flaming boulder launching over a castle wall.
Exactly. You picture this massive wooden catapult rolling up to a stone castle gate, warriors winding back a heavy rope, and boom, launching a giant rock. It looks so cool on screen.
It creates great cinematic tension. But historically and practically, it's completely false. They did not use them.
But why not? Surely they saw castle walls during all that traveling. Why wouldn't they use catapults?
It comes down to pure logistics and naval engineering. Loading a massive, clunky weapon like a catapult onto a Viking boat, which we call a long ship, would have been an absolute nightmare.
Oh, because of the shape of the boat?
Yes. A long ship had a very shallow draft. The bottom of the boat didn't go very deep into the water. This let them sail the deep ocean, but also row right up shallow rivers and land directly on beaches.
So putting a giant heavy catapult on it...
It would completely capsize the vessel. You cannot transport heavy artillery on a narrow, flexible ship.
So it's the ultimate example of needing to travel light. And for our listeners, travel light means HU. You carry very little so you can move quickly. Dragging heavy siege equipment across a beach would totally ruin their surprise attacks.
Exactly. Speed and agility were their tactical advantages. So instead of catapults, their actual weapons of choice were highly personal, very lethal, and completely portable. Spears, swords, heavy axes, arrows.
And the sources mentioned they had a fascinating relationship with these weapons. They revered them. They even gave them names.
Oh, terrifying names.
Right. Imagine a warrior charging at you on the beach with a sword officially named Leg Biter or an axe called Skull Splitter.
It's brilliant psychological warfare. It tells the enemy exactly what's coming.
And they were even buried with them. But speaking of identity, that brings up a really interesting linguistic point, which is myth number 2. They've always been called Vikings.
Right. If you went back in time 1,000 years and met one of these people, they would not use the word Viking to introduce themselves.
Where does the word come from?
It has roots in the Old Norse language,
Hmm.
spoken until the 14th century. In that language, the term loosely translates to a pirate or a raider. It was an action, a job description.
Something you did, not something you were. So they would go on a raid. And a quick vocab check. Raid, spelled R-A-I-D. Raid. Denim and Soleno. It's a sudden surprise attack to steal valuable goods.
Precisely. A Viking was just a person currently participating in a raid.
But the people being attacked didn't call them that, right?
No, terrified monks in England or France didn't yell, "The Vikings are coming." They usually referred to them by their geographical origin. They wrote, "The Northmen are coming."
The Northmen. That makes perfect sense. They just knew these scary guys were coming from the north.
And technically, Viking only applied to the small fraction of the population that actually went to sea. Modern historians use it as a label for the whole culture, but it's historically inaccurate.
Right, an ancient Norse farmer would be so confused to be like, I'm not a pirate, I'm just trying to grow cabbage.
It would be like calling every modern citizen a Marine, just because a small percentage of the population serves in the military.
That puts it perfectly into perspective. And by the way, we know all this from epic ancient stories called sagas, which comes directly from the Old Norse word for story.
Which brings us to myth number 3, and this is probably the most visually famous misconception.
Oh, the armor. Myth number 3. Vikings wore horned helmets.
Yes.
I feel like every movie, like the How to Train Your Dragon series, shows them wearing these heavy metal helmets with massive curved animal horns sticking out.
It's an iconic look, but completely fabricated. Costume designers for 19th century theatrical operas actually popularized the horned helmet. In real combat, wearing horns is a terrible idea.
Well, yeah, if they were traveling light and leaving catapults behind, they wouldn't wear something useless. But why is it physically bad in a fight?
As Nordic history expert Natalie Van Dusen points out, a horned helmet gives your enemy a massive, easy target.
Oh, to grab onto.
Or to hit with a sword.
Yeah.
Imagine you are in a tightly packed shield wall. Someone swings an axe at your head. If you have huge horns, their weapon catches on the horn. The leverage would instantly break your neck or violently knock the helmet off, leaving you exposed.
That is a fatal design flaw, so their real helmets were different.
Much smarter. They wore smooth helmets, usually iron. The smooth, rounded shape of the dome was specifically designed so that if a weapon struck it from above, the blow would slide right off.
Ah, so you want to deflect the blow. And for you listening, to deflect means or taillot. You want the force of the sword to bounce off harmlessly rather than catching on a giant decorative horn.
Brutal practicality. Everything served a survival purpose.
Which makes sense in extreme conditions. But that focus on survival actually challenges myth number 4. Vikings spent all their time attacking villages.
Yes, the classic historical bias.
We always picture them just constantly stealing loot. By the way, loot means shirtai or taillot, the treasure taken during war. We assume their whole economy was just raiding and grabbing loot all year round.
Because the monks who wrote the history books only saw them when they were attacking. We forget their normal, everyday reality. Raiding was a seasonal job.
Let me guess. Summer only.
You guessed it.
Because navigating the freezing North Atlantic in an open wooden boat in the dead of winter sounds like a terrible idea.
It was essentially a death sentence. They launched expeditions during the warmer summer months, and eventually they wanted land, not just silver, so they transitioned from quick hit-and-run raids to conquering territory and settling down.
So what did they do during the winter when they were stuck at home?
They were farmers, fishers, and shipbuilders. They had to survive and manage livestock like anyone else.
And according to the sources, they had a rich culture of leisure, too. They didn't just sit around sharpening axes. They swam, wrestled, and they were huge fans of board games.
Yes.
Archaeologists have found games incredibly similar to modern checkers and chess.
Like in Nefatov, which shows they weren't just mindless berserkers. A culture playing grid-based strategy games values tactical thinking and military organization.
That completely changes how you view them. And there were some funny cultural quirks, too. Like, today, someone might show off their wealth with a fancy sports car, but in Norse culture, owning a premium, well-bred horse was a massive status symbol.
A very public sign of success.
And their grooming habits. Beards were a huge source of pride. Legally and culturally, calling a grown man beardless was considered a major insult that could lead to a duel.
Which tells us a lot about their strict definitions of masculinity. But interestingly, that brings us to myth number 5. And this one involves a modern scientific twist that totally upends our assumptions about gender.
Right. Myth number 5. All Viking leaders were men. We all have that stereotype of the burly, heavily bearded male chieftain barking orders.
While men definitely dominated the military spheres, Norse women actually wielded a surprising amount of authority, especially compared to other European cultures at the time.
Well, if the men are gone sailing all summer, someone has to run the society.
Precisely. Women handled the family's home, the farm's agricultural production, and the finances. They held the keys to the property.
But did they ever fight? Did they go on raids?
They did join expeditions.
Yeah.
Historically, many stayed at the camps to manage logistics, doing the cooking and repairing clothing.
But there was that massive discovery in 2017.
A monumental shift in archaeology. So scientists were studying a famous grave in Birka, Sweden. The grave clearly belonged to a high-ranking individual.
And high-ranking, for our listeners, means sus, so someone in a very senior military position. Everyone just assumed it was a man.
Naturally. Because the grave was packed with weapons, shields, sacrificed horses, and a full set of those strategic gaming pieces used to plan tactics. It was the grave of a high-ranking battlefield commander.
But then what happened in 2017?
Modern scientists ran a genomic DNA test on the skeletal remains, and the results proved definitively that this elite military commander was a woman.
An incredible plot twist. It proves women could achieve the highest levels of martial authority.
Now, Natalie Van Dusen does point out that this specific grave would have been a rare exception, not the everyday rule.
But the point is, their societal structure allowed it to happen. It forces us to rethink the rigid boxes we put ancient cultures into.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, we have to talk about the skalds. We mentioned sagas earlier, those epic historical stories. Well, skalds were the people in charge of performing them.
Essentially professional Norse poets, but not quiet scholars in a library. These were fierce vocal performers who shouted dramatic poetry right in the middle of a chaotic battle.
To inspire the warriors and record their deeds in real time. Imagine dodging arrows in a shield wall, and a guy next to you is basically delivering a heavy metal rap battle at the top of his lungs.
And they often improvise these poems using a linguistic trick called kennings.
Right.
A kenning is a highly stylized metaphor. Instead of a simple noun for a common object, the skald would invent a poetic two-word phrase, like a riddle.
Okay, let's play a quick interactive game to test your skaldic translation skills. I'll read a few ancient kennings and you translate them into plain English for the listeners. Ready?
I am ready.
First one. What does a skald mean if he talks about the whale's road?
The vast road where the whales travel. That's the sea.
The sea. Beautiful. How about battle sweat?
Well, in close quarters combat, the fluid flying around isn't just perspiration. Battle sweat is blood.
Very graphic, but definitely vivid. Next one. Shield danger.
The most destructive danger to a wooden shield would be a heavy blade. So an axe or a sword.
Nice. And the last one. Weapons storm.
A chaotic storm of flying weapons. That represents the battle itself.
A weapons storm. Imagine a skald yelling over the crashing waves, "We sail the whale's road to bring the weapons storm." That is infinitely cooler than plain English.
It really is.
And speaking of weapons storms, how big were these armies? We picture a couple of boats, but it was much bigger, right?
Vastly larger. In the year AD 851, possibly the largest Viking fleet ever recorded, sailed straight up the River Thames to raid London.
How many ships?
A fleet of 350 ships.
350 long ships attacking simultaneously. That's a highly organized invading army, not just a disorganized band of pirates.
It completely redefines their tactical capabilities.
So, turning the question over to you, the listener, which of these Viking myths surprised you the most today? Was it the lack of horned helmets? Or the fact that these fierce warriors enjoyed playing chess during the winter?
Or perhaps the DNA evidence proving female military commanders existed, completely shattering our assumptions about medieval gender roles.
Exactly. When you peel back the Hollywood exaggeration, you uncover a culture that is infinitely more complex and fascinating. And that's why taking a deep dive into the history and the English vocabulary is so rewarding. Learning words like deflect or raid in their true historical context makes them so much easier to remember.
Because historical knowledge is most valuable when deeply understood in context.
Totally. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one completely new, provocative thought to chew on. We talked about how they conquered, but why did the Viking Age eventually end?
It's a good question.
Modern climate scientists have actually discovered that the Viking Age coincided with the medieval warm period. Global temperatures rose just enough to melt sea ice, making those epic voyages possible.
Wow.
But when the climate cooled back down a few centuries later, their expansive empire essentially froze. The ice returned, starving out their remote settlements and forcing them back home. So it makes you wonder how much of human history, the rise and fall of legendary empires, isn't actually determined by fierce warriors or brilliant kings at all, but simply by a slight change in the weather.
That completely changes the paradigm. It forces us to look at history through the uncontrollable forces of the planet itself.
Something to ponder the next time you're enjoying a warm summer day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and keep questioning the story.